Activism campaign. Today is Human Rights Day, and so we're really pleased to be able to present this three-part series on mental health and psychosocial support, which is being facilitated by our member organization, MSF Spain. As we all know, health is a human right, but we also need to recognize that mental health services are included in that right. And so we're really pleased today to be able to share a little bit more about the response and also prevention in terms of mental health and psychosocial support to survivors of gender-based violence. As in previous webinars, you may access interpretation either in French, Portuguese, or Arabic. You just need to look at the instructions on your screen and you will be able to be switched to one of those channels. So please do look at the slide in order to access interpretation. Next slide, please. My name is Jessica Gorham, and I'm the Regional Emergency GBV Advisor, working on behalf of the Gender-Based Violence Area of Responsibility here in East and Southern Africa. But for the purpose of today, I am also the chair of the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. I see a lot of familiar names on the line, and I hope that means that you have been attending our previous webinars throughout our 16 Days of Activism campaign, but also throughout the year, we host emerging practice webinars and other technical events. This webinar and all previous webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. You just need to go to the YouTube and then look for GBV AOR, and then you'll find this webinar and then all previous webinars on our YouTube channel. We will not be sending out the PowerPoint presentations. We would prefer if you watched the webinar again so that all of the information is within the context of the presenter. As I mentioned, this is a three-part series, so we're really happy that you're joining us today. We will be building on concepts. So today we're going to have a thorough overview of the psychological consequences of sexual violence. Tomorrow, at the same time, using the same link, we will present a spectrum of psychosocial support interventions for survivors of sexual violence. And then on Thursday, again, using the same link and at the same time, which is 2:30 to 3:30 East Africa time, we MSF Spain colleagues will be presenting a case study of their experiences in Palestine. And I think many of you know that MSF, and particularly in today's session, MSF Spain, is known for providing best practices in terms of mental health interventions in emergencies, which is why we're really happy that we have our expert on the line today, Rayan Fatouche, who is the Regional Mental Health Technician for MSF Spain. If you have any questions throughout the series, and particularly today, please do write your questions in the chat. Myself and Ana Marquise from MSF Spain will be monitoring the chat and trying to answer your questions in real time. Again, if you have any questions, please write your questions in the chat and we will try to answer those questions in real time. Please do keep your videos off throughout the presentation, and we expect all of you to be muted throughout the presentation as well. or else it won't work in terms of simultaneous interpretation. So thank you all very much for joining us. I'm really pleased now to hand over to today's presenter, as I mentioned, is Rayan Fatouche, the Regional Mental Health Technician from MSF Spain. Over to you, Rayan, and welcome to the to the Working Group for East and Southern Africa. We're very happy to have you on the line.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really an opportunity and a pleasure to be present today and to be doing the presentation within the GBV and all these participants for today. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. And voila. Can anyone see it?
Not yet, but there was a delay during our practice session too, so.
So trying again.
Would it be easy? Valentina, is it possible you could download the presentation deck and then we can share it from our side?
Thank you.
Yeah. So Rayan, if you want to get started, we're going to have that shared in approximately 1 minute. Go on or start.
Okay, so I'm Rayan Fatouche. I'm the Regional Mental Health Technician working with MSF Spain. And today we're going to be talking about sexual violence. So I wanted to ask all the participants, if it's possible, if you can write down in the chat, what is your understanding in sexual violence? What do you understand with the word sexual violence, if possible? We're going to have less than 1 minute for the answers. Human rights violation. Harm. No consent. Very good point. An act done against a person's will. Very good. Exertion of power. Very good. Please, can we see the next slide? Thank you. Abuse of power. So guys, you don't need me, you know it all. Any form of sexual violence, okay. Abuse against women, men, children. But now I'm not able to follow anymore all the very good answers that you're writing down. So I'm sorry, maybe Valentina, I hope I'm not mistaken with the name. If we can, yes, thank you so much. So in MSF, we adopt the definition that sexual violence is any actual sexual act, attempt to obtain an act or unwanted sexual commands, everything that you put in the chat. As well, it could include rape, attempted rape. It doesn't mean that it's only rape. It's also attempted rape, forced contact between the mouth or any genitalia, unwanted kissing, touching, sexual exploitation, forced nudity, and as well on the legal aspects, we try to make sure to understand further the legal definition of rape and sexual violence because it varies from one country to another. And we should understand as well that sexual violence, as you mentioned in the chat, that it's an abuse of power. It's also abuse of authority, of trust as well, and it could involve manipulation, threats, blackmailing, in forcing the person to engage in a sexual act against their will, exactly as you wrote. And it could take the shape of threatening the person not to obtain a job or to be dismissed from their job, or refusing to provide access to basic goods or services, and as well the perpetrator may pressure by providing necessary basic goods or also like protecting them from armed group. And of course, this is in exchange for sex. It could also take the shape of threatening to share harmful rumors to really hurt the person and forcing them for sex, and as well to refuse to allow them to cross the checkpoint or a border. And this is mostly what we see, unfortunately, within our project. Valentina, please, can we go next? Thank you so much. So exactly as you were mentioning, somebody mentioned that it's something done without consent. Exactly. So it is an informed, free, and voluntary choice. And we should highlight that there is no consent when agreement is obtained through threats or by force, or when the person is unable to understand the consequences of an action or not aware of their right, and they do not have any power to refuse. As well, if they are not able to give consent due to impairment of reasoning, of judgment that could be related to intoxication or being ill or mentally or like mental or intellectual or developmental ability. Next, please. So another question to keep you with me. Who can be a victim of sexual violence? So if we can write in the chat, please. Anyone. Tout le monde. La communauté. Okay. Anyone. Bravo. Okay. Thank you so much. Valentina, please, can we put the next slide? Thank you so much. So exactly, sexual violence can be experienced by anyone, regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, everything. Anyone can be a victim of sexual violence, and perpetrator can be any person regardless of the relationship. So it could be an intimate partner, like a husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. It could be a family member. It could be a religious leader. It could be a community leader, a teacher, an employer. So, and it could as well be humanitarian aid workers, as us, as you guys, and as well as peacekeepers, and of course armed groups, and any stranger. Where it could happen in any setting. So sometimes we think that home is safe, but sometimes it's not. So it could happen at home, it could happen at school, in the workplace, in the community, and also something that we see in common within our projects is that sexual violence could be done in detention centers or detention facilities, and as well could be happening during displacement and in conflict. I want to share with you an example of like lately what we observed is that it's when it's harvesting time in one certain location, in one project. So this could be putting people more at risk, because when they go to harvest, and with the long grass, this could provide like a visual blockage where people could be at risk of sexual violence. Also, sexual violence is used to terrorize, punish, and humiliate people. It is used as a tactic of war, and unfortunately, it's a cheap weapon of war, because sexual violence doesn't cost money and yet does so much harm. Can we change the slide, please? So let's talk a bit about understanding child sexual abuse. So it often occurs in the family, as we were saying, at home by a family member or someone close. And this is a tricky part, because these profiles usually they are within a relationship of trust, relationship of responsibility, or relationship of power. It often occurs without physical force or physical resistance from the child, but this happens with threats and manipulation and control. It goes on progressive and ongoing. It could be going on like ongoing within days, weeks, and years. So children might experience sexual violence by their peers, by older adults, teacher, employers, religious leaders at school and the workplace, as well that adolescent could be experiencing that in dating relationship, also within a child, early or forced marriage, or in the context of transactional or sex or survival sex and sexual exploitation. Next, please. On understanding sexual violence against men. So let's not think that sexual violence only happen by men and that perpetrators are only men, but it's also committed by women. And it's often perpetrated to demonstrate power, dominance, and control. And as we said, it's a tactic of war, it's a strategy, and also to make the survivor feel a range of emotions, which today we're going to talk about, and also tomorrow with Anna, my colleague. So it could occur in detention facilities and as well being part of sexual torture. In conflict, it is also very used towards a specific ethnic group to humiliate people, to make them feel ashamed, and to also impact not only the individual himself, but also the families and the communities. Thank you so much. Can we move? Okay. So we're not going to see every type of sexual violence that men could experience, but just to give some example, like mostly sexual torture, and as well electroshocks that is being done to testicles, to the penis, as well that enforced rape that is super impactful on the psychological aspect when we forced men to rape other people, and sometimes it could be someone from the family. Thank you, Valentina. Yes. So today we're going to see together the consequences of sexual violence on the physical aspect, on the psychological aspect, and as well the social aspects. Can we move, please? So on the physical consequences of sexual violence, there are the immediate medical consequences, like obviously injuries, so things that are obvious, sexual transmitted infection, HIV, hepatitis, and unwanted pregnancy. There are those also consequences that are more long-lasting, like unsafe abortion, generalized or specific pain, gastrointestinal problems, disability. And as well, today we will see the medically unexplained physical or psychosomatic complaints or symptoms that could be in the shape of sweating a lot, palpitation, shortness of breath, having dissociative symptoms that includes fainting, and as well sometimes medically unexplained paralysis. Next, please. Thank you. So, yalla, let's go to the chat. What could be the psychological consequences of sexual violence? I already give you some spoilers. I can see PTSD, depression, sadness, anger, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, alcohol, la peur, death, trauma, suicide. Now I see a lot of suicides. Suicide, self-hate, rejection, isolation. Okay. Use and abuse of alcohol and drugs. Very good. Thank you so much, Valentina, can we change the slide? Thank you so much. So psychological consequences of sexual violence is that we need to consider that SV or sexual violence include threatened sexual violence or actual sexual violence or witnessing sexual violence. Because also remember that in the tactic of war, sometimes people are forced to witness other people being raped or other people going through sexual violence, and most of the time could be family members. So these events are highly likely traumatic to the survivor. It is not the objective facts that determine whether an event is traumatic or not. We really have to respect what the survivor is going through. We have to respect the experience that they have been through and their feelings and everything they are going through, which are all valid. So survivors of sexual violence may experience a wide range of psychological, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral reactions, signs, and symptoms that we're going to see today. Can we move, please? Thank you so much. So on the physical aspect, so it is more psychosomatic, so related to the psychological distress that is reflecting within the body. So it could show up as sleeping problems, so either sleeping a lot or sleeping a little bit. We always have a tendency to think that it's only the few hours or insomnia that we are not that this is an indicator, but also another indicator is sleeping a lot. That is not the same as before. It could be the same with changes of eating behavior. So either eating a lot or the appetite change as well, muscle tension, fatigue, headaches, difficulty breathing, and panic attacks. So I want to highlight that within MSF experience, since we are a medical organization, most of the survivors that we see that maybe could be identified and not disclosing at first that what they have been through is that they come and they visit our medical teams. And when the medical teams rule out any medical condition or organic condition, this is where they consider referring to the mental health team. Thank you so much. Can we move? Yes. So on the emotional aspect, we could see several wide range of emotions. So despair, sadness, grief, and I imagine that many of you, I just had a very quick glimpse of what you wrote on the chat. Also, many of you mentioned anger. There are also these emotions that are related to self, which are shame, guilt, blaming ourselves, having a low self-esteem, self-hate, feeling contaminated or dirty. In emotions related to control, this is where, because the sexual violence or the whole incident that happened was out of the survivor's control, this is where they feel that the loss of control, the insecurity, the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. As well, we could see a common emotional aspect related to social, which could be not trusting others anymore or not having the same, not enjoying the same activities or being in the company of our usual friends and feeling more and more isolated. What could be related to mood is feeling shocked and as well numb. So as if we don't have any feelings or we don't have any reaction, but let's always consider that not having a reaction is also a reaction. Some people might feel that they have this experience outside of their own body. And of course, as well, some people might have the fear of not being believed, being blamed, judged, or having this generalized idea that any stranger is a danger, as well other fear from rejection, stigma. Thank you. Can we move? Thank you so much. On the cognitive aspect, so they could be confusion, disbelief, attention and concentration problems. Sorry, because something is coming up on my screen. Okay. Avoidance reaction, so either denying or minimizing the whole experience of what happened. So avoiding as well thoughts related to, sorry, I'm keep getting about the speaking language. Let me put it, and then I can continue with you guys. Okay. So in terms of relating to safety, is this shattered, broken sense of control or trust with others. Also, survivors of sexual violence might be suffering from recurring nightmares, re-experiencing the trauma, flashback. They could be having these rumination thoughts, thinking all the time, why me? Why did this happen to me? As well, anxiety reactions, feeling anxious, depressive cognitions, these thoughts that the world now is a dangerous and chaotic place that is unpredictable and unsafe. Thank you so much. Can we? Thank you. On the behavioral aspects, I want to mention regarding the arousal reactions. So being hyper alert and being jumpy and like also we say that the person feel on the edge whenever there is a loud noise, whenever there is a sudden move, and the person would be unable to relax. On the expression of emotions, it could go from tearfulness, it could also be crying, laughter, screaming, aggression, mutism, many other behavioral aspects, as well as avoiding places or people, conversations that are related to sexual violence or to the incident itself, as well compulsive washing or praying or religious ritual that is being done more than the usual, as well as isolation and any as well behavioral aspect related to safety. So taking like risk-taking behaviors, as well having unsafe sexual relationships or practices, and the person might be neglecting him or herself. Next, please. Okay. So what could be that? No, now I'm going to ask you, is immediate reactions after sexual violence considered normal? Yes, I see. Yes, yes, it is. Yes. Okay, very good. Okay, thank you so much. Can we move to the next slide? So, some survivors may develop mental health disorders. I don't know if you notice, we are using all the time some may, because it's not that everyone who have been through a potentially traumatic event means that they will have mental health disorder. So in whatever reaction, it's not like a formula. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. So this is why it's only a percentage of the cohort of survivors that may develop mental health disorders. So this is mostly when symptoms persist and have an impact on the daily functioning. The mental health disorders could emerge within weeks, months, or years after the event that happened, and they can include anxiety, depression, PTSD, many of the disorders that you mentioned within the chat. Thank you so much. Next. So, even though a person may develop mental health symptoms or disorder, But it's important for us to remember that most adverse reactions after a traumatic event are expected and are understandable and not considered pathological. So it's not a sign of mental illness. We do not put a diagnosis for a survivor of sexual violence that is having normal reactions to abnormal event, to a very scary, traumatic event that just happened with the person. And we need to understand that the first month is a period of adjustment. As well, we should give people credit that they have their own resources, either internal factors, their own resilience, and some of them might, like most of them, will cope over time and do not experience continued symptoms. However, some people may have symptoms that might persist for several weeks or even years following the exposure. Thank you so much, Valentina. Thank you. So again, we're going to see some common reactions following a potentially traumatic event. So we can see the immediate consequences that could be normal stress and distress, same as worry, fear, sadness. And we can see as well severe stress reaction, such as paralysis, panic reactions, emotional crisis, and acute psychotic reactions. After that is the post-immediate consequences, that is 1 month. So here we could see acute stress actions, re-experiencing the event, avoiding everything related to the event, and also we can see substance abuse. For 1 month and above, we can here start talking about symptoms or disorder, which is PTSD, depressive disorder, anxiety, and so on. Thank you so much, Valentina. So some survivors blame themselves on their reaction during a traumatic event, and especially the ones who experience tonic immobility. Some studies show that around 70% of women identify go through a tonic immobility, so they just froze. But we're going to talk more about that. So when we are facing a very scary, when we are confronted with an acute stress, fearful, danger, our body could take different responses as fight, flight, or freeze. So if we want to explain a bit about fight, is that exactly as the name. So the person might physically fight by pushing, also verbally fight by screaming, yelling no. And this will be the fight reaction. In the flight reaction, it will be more fleeing from the situation, running, hiding, trying to get away from this situation. The tricky part is the freeze reaction. So there is always this misconception that freezing, so it means that the person is immobile like a statue and even silent. And this is where some people might think that this is consent because there was no reaction. Actually, what is happening with the person is that while they are being immobile, while they are being not saying anything, not moving, it is that they are awake, they are alert, they are trying to find a possible solution to the very scary situation they are in now, and they are trying to prepare themselves with an action plan. So this is briefly about the freeze reaction. Thank you so much. Yes, I wanted just to say one thing. It's just that thank you. We need to explain to the survivors about these reactions and that these are biological reactions that come up automatically as a response while facing a very scary situation. Thank you so much, Valentina. So Yalla, in the chat, please, if you can write what are the social consequences of sexual violence. Victim blaming. Stigma. Isolation, yes. Rejection. Increased poverty, very good. Discrimination. Very good. Thank you so much. Can we change this slide, please? Voila. Thank you so much. So the social consequences of sexual violence can impact the person's current and future sexual relationships. So the survivor may have difficulties starting or continuing a sexual relationship. This is due to a flashback, a feeling of shame, also numbness, and the person might withdraw. Even if they started a relationship, they might withdraw from any intimate relationship. As you said, many of you said shame, stigma, judgment. So this is within the community, very good. As well, you mentioned isolation, and exactly, I can see now rejection, stigma. So it's also rejection by the family, being abandoned. Many of us, I imagine, also you heard or you have seen that many survivors have been divorced or had their children taken away from them. So they might also face violence or
I think that Rayan, we are unable to hear you.
I think her internet connection.
Is it wavering?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will try to reach out to her to see if she's coming back.
Okay.
In Lebanon, sometimes she's in Lebanon, sometimes you have electricity cuts, so it might be
Definitely.
connected with that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm guessing
We'll give a minute to see if
okay.
Rayan will be coming back, and appreciate under those difficult circumstances.
Mhm.
And maybe while we're waiting for Rayon to come back, we had a very good question in the Q&A. And the question was, I have noticed that as part of clinical management of rape package, psychosocial support is provided to all victims or survivors of rape, particularly psychosocial first aid. Is this practice recommended as part of the immediate actions to support survivors? And I'm just going to review the answer that Anna had provided, who is the mental health advisor for MSF Spain, because I think these are some good questions that we could all benefit from. And her response is that PFA is a first line intervention in sexual violence. PFA is psychological first aid, and that intervention is more universal and not as professionalized in some ways. And it means that it should follow the needs of the survivor. If the survivor doesn't want to continue answering, he or she should not be forced. It doesn't include speaking about the event itself or being an emotional debriefing. And I think for those who have attended some of our previous presentations, you know that psychological first aid is a universal tool or resource that we use in emergencies. It's not specific to the GBV field, but the components are really relevant, I think, to the work that we do. And so I think Anna is saying, as a first line of defense for survivors of violence, we can use a lot of the approaches that are found in psychological first aid. And then I think tomorrow and on day 3 of the series, we're going to talk about what it means to be an expert or a professional in terms of mental health and psychosocial support provision as well, because there is some distinctions there.
Exactly. And something that I didn't put in the chat, but I think it's relevant also to consider, is that PFA is for recent events, for recent critical events, which includes sexual violence. So many times in our clinics, we don't have people that were just raped. They can even come to us when they had been raped years ago, months ago. So in that situations, PFA is not the first line intervention. There is also something, but there is not much research on that, which is if someone who had been subject to recurrent critical events, so more than one time, sexual violence or something else, if PFA is still effective. And to be honest, there is not much research around it. So I think it's still fundamental to provide PFA when it's a recent event and to follow the clues of the survivor. And if the survivor does not want to speak or does not wants to stop there, we obviously should not continue. Ryan is not responding to me, so I don't know exactly.
No, I'm here.
You're here.
Yeah, I've been here like 2-3 minutes, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah. So
Right.
go ahead.
Okay. So I don't know what you heard last thing of me, but okay. So I'll go ahead. So among the social consequences of sexual violence is also that unfortunately the person is unable to marry due to stigma, due to all of these points that we mentioned, or even worse, is being forced to marry the perpetrator. It's also that they are being forced to leave their community. And I think also someone mentioned in the chat, where I saw it very quickly, that it's also an increased risk of further sexual violence, contributing to a cycle of harm and vulnerability. Next, please. So, what could be specific signs and symptoms for minors? If you can write in the chat, please. Withdrawal, silence, crying, bedwetting, fighting, isolation, nightmares, very good. Okay, thank you so much. Can we change the slide, please? So exactly. Children may experience similar signs and symptoms as adults, as we saw and as you are writing in the chat. So this could so they could react according to several factors like age, development stage, the relationship with the perpetrator, the gender, cultural context, and the support. Next, please. So we're going to see different age groups very quickly. We're not going to go through them in details. It's just for you to have an idea. So if we see from 0 to 5 years old, we can see, as we saw for adults, like problems, sleeping problems. Someone mentioned as well bedwetting, soiling accidents. And we can see in the cognitive, we can see a regression within the developmental stage. So if, for example, a child stopped sucking their thumb, then after the event, then they might start again to suck their thumb. And they could be on the behavioral aspect more clingy to their parents, or having repetitive play where they mimic the whole event that happened with them before. Next, please. From 6 to 9 years old, so similar as well for the previous age group. So let's talk a bit about some emotional aspects like sadness, anxiety, guilt, loss of interest. On the cognitive side, we can talk about a decline in school performance. We can talk on the behavioral aspect about avoiding physical contact. We can talk about refusal to be alone. Next, please. So from 10 to 19 years old, on the emotional aspect, we can mention additionally to the previous age group. So I'm not mentioning things that are more or less the same. So we can talk about low self-esteem, poor body image, and it's also a tricky age because it's adolescence, pre-adolescence, etc. And on the behavioral aspect, we can see anger, aggression, disruptive behavior, delinquency, self-destruction behavior, so using alcohol, drugs, self-harm, or at a very young age having as well sexual activity. Thank you so much. Next, please. Okay. So very briefly, we're going to talk about the consequences of child abuse that the survivors may experience later on in adulthood. So it could be having emotional difficulties, could be having learning difficulties, criminal behavior. Please, I'm always some may, so it's not everyone. Could have anxiety, depression, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, attempts. They could be struggling with parenting or with their relationships, being higher at risk of experiencing sexual violence or intimate partner violence, and of being involved or exploited in sex work. Also, some of you mentioned substance or alcohol use. They could be suffering from poor physical health as obesity, binge eating, etc. And as well, they are at higher risk of perpetrating sexual violence or IPV. Thank you. Next. Okay, so I'm conscious of the time because also we lost a bit of time when I lost internet. I apologize for that. So I want you to consider that sexual violence on minors do not only impact the children, but they also impact the caregivers. So the caregivers might be going through a wide range of emotions that are like super contradictive. So feeling guilty, feeling angry, punishing the child, blaming the child, at the same time feeling guilty themselves because how come they didn't identify, or how come they didn't see signs, or they feel that they were not protecting enough their children. Or so please consider always that support needs to be given always for the caregivers as well. Next, please. Very quickly, what could be specific consequences for men? So same as adults, but what could be very specific for men? Shame, anger, low self-esteem. Very good. Thank you. Can we change the slide, please? So consequences of sexual violence for men could range from shame and humiliation, especially that there is this idea that men should be strong and always strong. So this is why they might go through feelings of self-blame, shame, feeling that they are not worthy, that they are weak, that also they should have defended themselves, and they start even doubting their traditional role of masculine identity to be the protector or the provider. Also, there could be fears and concern about sexual orientation, and this is related to the myth that any sexual contact between men is homosexuality. So this could lead the person to feel angry, guilty, or confusion, as well self-hate. So also what could be increasing the guilt or confusion, that there is a common involuntary physical response of sexual arousal, erection, or ejaculation during when the sexual violence is happening. So, of course, this is going to impact some of the men. Thank you. Can we move? So, men may feel the impact on sexuality and intimacy, so they could lose the sexual interest, avoid intimate relationships, or have psychosexual difficulties or compulsive sexual behavior. So you all mentioned regarding anger and aggression, and also regarding social isolation. So they might feel unable to connect with others, withdraw from relationship, from families, from the society, from the community, everything. And they might use alcohol or drugs to manage or to numb their emotions. Yes, and that's it. Thank you so much. Q&A.
Thank you,
If there is enough
Rayan.
time, I know that.
We have a
But
few minutes. I might turn over to your colleague, Anna. Did you sense any trends in the questions around the presentation today? Maybe just 1 or 2 minutes to clarify any questions that might have come up repeatedly. Anna?
I think most of the questions were related with PFA, with psychological first aid. Reinforcing what I've been saying in the chat, psychological first aid is a first line intervention that should be provided to sexual violence survivors when the incident has happened very recently, if not part of what we do in PFA will also be used, but tomorrow we'll go through exactly the steps of how to intervene when there was a sexual violence disclosure. And keeping in mind that PFA is not just for mental health professionals, that any trained professional, either on health, education, protection, whatever, can be trained and can provide PFA. They need to be trained, and this is super important, and they need to be supervised to understand if they are following the steps of PFA, but also how they are dealing with their own emotions, because sometimes dealing, especially when we deal with many cases of sexual violence, it can be difficult, no? And the staff also needs to be supervised. Keep also in mind that, especially if it's not a mental health professional, usually they don't have they're not used to dealing with so many emotional distress, and this supervision is fundamental also for that. So I think most of the questions are on PFA, but I guess that people can put other questions now.
And I saw another question in the Q&A portion, and it was around caregivers. Since here in East and Southern Africa, we realized that through the GBV-IMS, or the Information Management System, many of our incidences involve children or individuals who are under the age of 18. And the question is around what could potentially be the psychosocial or the mental health impact or effect for caregivers. And maybe you could give us a little insight based on your work around that. Since many of our survivors are child survivors, what's the impact or the effect that might have on caregivers? Over.
And you want to answer tomorrow? We are also going to speak a bit about that, but
yeah, exactly. So I don't know if it cut when I was talking about it. So as I was saying that parents, so maybe we can put the slide as well so people can see it. So they could be going through a wide range of emotions. They could be feeling guilty that they didn't provide the protection that they should as parents to their children, that they did not pay attention to the signs, or they didn't observe the changes, or that something is happening. They could also be going through denial and minimizing what happened. And this is even more difficult when the sexual violence happened, was done by someone that usually is trusted, or it could be, many times we see it could be the partner, or the boyfriend, or the father, or it also could be a woman. So it could be any member from the family that should be taking care of the child. It could be that like feeling that suspicious because they used to trust this neighbor, they used to trust this community leader or this religious leader. So this is why it's very important to provide psychosocial support to the caregivers as well.
There is a very interesting question in the chat asking if sexual orientation can be determined after a sexual violence event. And no, people might have doubts. As Heinz was saying, especially with men, people might have doubts definitely about their sexual orientation, especially, for example, if it was a man raped by another man. But sexual orientation is not determined by sexual violence experience. And this is something that it's important that each one of us providing care to people who have been subject to some form of sexual violence, that we also tell them, no, when we speak about the experience, that doubts are normal, but sexual orientation is something that is determined by probably since biology. No, it's not something that changes with sexual violence experience.
Great. Thank you both to Rayan and to Anna, who have been, to Rayan particularly for your presentation, and to Anna for monitoring the chat and answering those questions in real time. It is appreciated, and I think we were able to actually answer quite a few questions that way. I want to remind everyone that this is day one of our three-part series. So please do join us tomorrow at 2:30 East Africa time for the second installation of this three-part series, where we will actually go more into the interventions themselves. And I think it'll also become clearer the roles and responsibilities in terms of who can actually provide interventions at what level. Because as we all know, here at the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa, we do also promote global standards of care. And by that, we mean we want to make sure that this field of mental health and even psychosocial support provision is professionalized, and that there's an understanding of the limitations in terms of what type of care can be provided by those with particular skill sets. So we're really excited about tomorrow's presentation as well, which will also deep dive into what are some of those interventions that MSF Spain promotes in their work for survivors of sexual violence. And there's a spectrum of interventions. It's not just clinical management of rape. So we're really excited to see all of you here tomorrow for the second installation of our series. And don't forget that we will also have a third installation where we'll actually see the practical implications of a case study that's been in terms of Palestine. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm the chair of the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. We're so pleased that you joined us for our last event for the 16 Days of Activism campaign. Remember that today is Human Rights Day, And we know that all women and girls have a right to be safe in their homes and communities, and also to access health care. And that also means mental health care. And so take that with you today, and take it with you throughout the year and next year, that we all have that right as human beings, regardless of where we live, our sexual orientation, our religious background, that we all have a right, a human right, to be safe in our homes and communities, and also to have access to health care, including mental health care. So I'm really happy to have all of you on the line, because I know you'll be promoting these human rights throughout today, and then I said throughout the year to come. Please do go on to our YouTube channel. We have been disseminating our videos, which are highlighting human rights defenders from throughout the region. I should say adolescent human rights defenders. So please do go on our YouTube channel to see all those videos, which I think you've been receiving pretty frequently, even over email. But we really want to make sure that those human rights defenders go viral for the right reasons. We have some amazing adolescents throughout our region doing some pretty complex and, brave things, right, in their communities, whether it's in Kenya, Eswatini, Burundi, Mozambique, Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia. As I said last time, it gives me so much hope for our future, because I can see in these videos the next generation of human rights defenders, and they're amazingly impressive. So please do go out. Thanks again to Rayan. Anna, I think we'll see you tomorrow as the main presenter. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all online tomorrow at 2:30 East Africa time for the second installation of our series on mental health and psychosocial support. Thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great afternoon, and I'll see you all online tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.